Buying a house will be the biggest purchase of your life, and it's absolutely crucial that you do it right. In this video, I'll tell you 6 things that are an absolute must-knows if you're planning to buy a house in Denmark. The first one is the square meter scam, and this is important. The apartment sizes that are advertised in a Bolig portal or a Bolig side are not the real apartment sizes. So in Denmark, you have 2 ways to measure the size of the flat. One is called BVR, Bolig Areal, and the other one is called Tinglus Areal. For the BVR area, this is what you see in the adverts, and you also see it in the realtor websites. But the crucial thing here is that this measures the size of what is in between the walls of the apartment, but on top of that adds, the total share that this apartment or the specific apartment has on corridors or like common area corridors, hallways, basements, and so on. And then when you want to see the real size of the apartment, so meaning that you enter the door and then you actually see what's exactly the apartment, then is when you use this Tinglus area. And this of course includes balconies as well, but doesn't include corridors, doesn't include common areas. This is exactly what you get. And the difference between the two can be really big. So for instance, this is apartment that you see here where I'm living. It's like Tinglus Areal, so meaning the area actually inside the apartment is around 100-250 square meters, but it was advertised as 113. Now, the building next to me over there, an apartment that had exactly the same layout, basically you could go and measure it, it's exactly the same as mine, was advertised as 125 square meters. So again, like 10 square meters more, even more than that, right? So, and all because that apartment owned a bigger share of corridors and basements, or maybe the corridors were bigger. And the key thing here is that those extra square meters are useless. I mean, you really can't, go and put a bed in a corridor or like send your friends, to sleep in the common areas, right? So on top of that, you're even paying taxes on property taxes on these corridors, on your share of the corridors, right? So the more of this difference there is between the Tinglus and then the BBR, you could end up paying a lot more money. Just note as well is that in many cases, even the Tinglus Areal is incorrect or exaggerated. So especially in older apartments. So if you're really interested in not getting ripped off, what you need to do is measure the size of the apartment yourself. Number 2 is Ejer versus Andel apartments. And there are 2 types of apartments in Denmark, broadly speaking. One is Ejer and the other one is Andel. For Ejer, you are the owner of the flat. And similar to in other countries, you pay joint expenses as, for instance, cleaning of the halls, the housemaster of Bisbaten, as it's called here, garbage removal, building insurance, to an owners association that's called the Ejerforening. But after all, it's your apartment. You can do all the sort of stuff that's normal in any other country. So you can, rent it out, do Airbnb, add or remove walls inside the apartment if it doesn't bother the people. Basically like it's your house. And then of course, if you buy an Ejer, you can get access to all the cheap loans and fancy loans and all that type of stuff that you want. Basically, you get the best deal in terms of loans. For Andels, it's a bit of more of a gray area. In an Andel, you're not the full owner of the flat. You're like an investor or a shareholder in an association or a community that owns a specific building. So as you're not the actual owner, you give up power and control again to this association. And there's like some good associations, some bad associations, there's a lot in between. And you'll see that overall, on average, Andels have a lot more rules and regulations and can often be very strict. For instance, you can't really rent out your Andel, again, in most cases, right? And if you can do so, it could have to be a fixed or low price or for a specific set period of time, and only after receiving approval from the association. You are not allowed to set the selling price of your Andel if you decide to move out. Again, the association will decide how much is that price you can be able to sell. Then on top of regulations, you also have that the running cost of owning an Andel will be higher than owning a normal Ejer apartment, because both the joint expenses of the association are going to be higher, and also because the loans to buy an Andel are more expensive than there are to buy Ejer. Number 3 is interest-only loans. So when you loan money, you're required over the loan period normally to pay interest on the loaned amount and then to repay the loan itself, this in installments. So for instance, if you loan money for 30 years, each year you will pay 1/30 of the loan value that you have took from the bank, plus interest on top of that. In Denmark, we have loans, and in other countries as well, but in Denmark it's very popular as well, that you have loans where they actually let you skip, these installments for the first 10 years, effectively meaning that your loans are interest only. So you don't need to pay this 1/30 of the loan back for the first 10 years. You actually just pay the interest. And as you know, interest rates have been really low for a long time. And because of this means that you only pay interest on a very, very low amount, which means all of a sudden buying a house can become really, really good cash flow wise. I find interest-only loans especially exciting because if you get an interest-only loan, buying a place can be cheaper than renting out for the vast majority of cases. Again, for the first 10 years at least, right? And then even after 10 years, you can likely renegotiate your loan. What you care about is cash flow, and what you care is about having more money in your pocket each month. No, that's definitely possible with this type of loans. And I can tell you, for instance, from my side, I would have not bought bought my apartment had I not had this opportunity, because again, it makes the deal good. It means that instead of having to take, I don't know, 20-25,000 out of your pocket each single month to pay for a flat, you can actually pay half that. Again, cash flow wise, big deal. There are two catches when it comes to interest only loans. The first one is that when you get these interest only loans / no repayment loans, you have a slightly higher Bidragssats. I'm going to explain that in the next 30 seconds, but just keep on that. And the second thing is that not all banks will give you interest only loans, especially if you're a foreigner. You need to go and negotiate this with the bank if you want to get access to this. And I even built a whole course on bank negotiation that you can check down in the video description. That's where you can actually see how you can actually, the specific wordings you should use to get to banks and get them to give you this deal. Number 4 are Bidragssats. And Bidragssats are fees that a bank set to make money off you even if you pay 0 or negative interest. For instance, for a fixed 30-year loan without repayments, this fee will be around 1% of the loan amount per year. These fees are absolute BS, and the banks have cartel, and as they can really make so much money with the normal mortgages because interest rates have been so low for a long time, they just raise these fees all together in concert. It's just ridiculous. This means that even if your interest for your loan, it would be, for instance, 0.15% or something like that, the effective rate, what you need to actually pay yearly as interest, will be around 1%. And there's literally no way around it. How much Bidragssats you need to pay depends on 4 factors. First, which bank and credit institute you borrow from, how much of the value of the apartment you need to actually borrow, so like 50% of the value, 60% of the value, 80% of the value, and so on and so on. If you took repayments or not, as I mentioned, if you have like repayments, you pay a slightly lower Bidragssats than if you don't have repayments, meaning if you have interest loan, you have like higher fees, and what type of loan you get. So just don't get fooled. Always ask for the banks to actually what is the Bidragssats. The best of cases is that you want to get this as low as possible. Number 5 is mortgages and Kurs. So in Denmark, it's not banks who actually borrow you money for your mortgage. So what you do itself is that you get banks to connect you with investors or institutional investors, like pension funds as well and so on, who actually then buy your mortgages as bonds, again with the bank facilitating all that. So instead of setting up a mortgage, what you actually do is you borrow directly from investors. What this means in practice is that when you actually need to get a mortgage, say for instance for 2 million, your actual debt will be more or less than that. So it can be like 2.2 million or 1.8 million, depending on the bond setup that you choose. The lower the interest, the higher will be the debt. If you fix rate, for instance, for 1%, as many did for most of 2021, if the rate goes up to 4%, as it appears it could be going up any moment new, you can actually get literally a big chunk of that loan cancelled because of this bond setup. This is complex, and unlike any other country I have seen so far, I made a specific deep dive report linked down in the video description where you can actually get all this explained into depth and understand like what is the actual setup with these bonds and like what are the opportunities and risks that you have when you're getting into something like this. Last is that capital gains are not taxed in Denmark. So let's say you bought your apartment for 3 million and you then sell it for 5 million, you'll have a capital gain of 2 million, right? So in Denmark, this 2 million of gain is not taxed. And this is hard to believe considering that in Denmark, otherwise everything else is taxed. And Denmark is the highest country in the world in terms of taxation for almost everything. In practice, this is the case because you in effect pay high property taxes in Denmark. The taxes are based on the valuation of your property each year. There's just a catch on this, right? So if you rent your apartment out and then you sell it, then you need to pay again a 35% or so on the gain to SCAT. This like no capital gain setup only works when it's your primary residence. Now there's a catch, of course. You don't pay capital gains so long you have been living in the property the moment you're selling it. If you bought, for instance, a flat and you rented it out and then sold it, then you need to pay around 35% in tax to SCAT on the gain that you have made. If you want to hear 2 more points like this, check this video over here where I go through 2 more rules that are especially important for foreigners in Denmark. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again next week.